My family tried for years to reunite me with my ex, but I married another man, got pregnant, and finally set boundaries. When I was 16, I started dating a boy named Ethan, who happened to be my older brother Daniel's best friend. We were inseparable throughout high school, sharing the kind of innocent, dreamy love that teenagers often experience. Ethan was kind, funny, and always there for me, whether I needed help with homework or a shoulder to cry on after a tough day. We'd spend hours walking through the park near our school, talking about our dreams, his of becoming an architect, mine of traveling the world. I thought we'd be together forever, as young love often makes you believe. But as graduation approached, reality set in. Ethan proposed to me the day after our ceremony, down on one knee with a simple ring he'd saved up for by working part-time at a local hardware store. I was stunned. At 18, I wasn't ready for marriage. I wanted to go to college, see the world, and figure out who I was outside of our small hometown. I turned him down, explaining that I loved him but needed time to grow. He was heartbroken, and I felt awful, but I knew it was the right decision for me. What I didn't expect was the fallout with my family. My parents, especially my mom, had always adored Ethan. He was practically part of the family, always at our house for Sunday dinners or joining us on camping trips. My brother Daniel, who was 36 at the time, was furious with me for breaking Ethan's heart. He called me selfish, saying I had thrown away a good man who loved me. My sister, Laura, who was 32 and had always been the more dramatic of my siblings, took it even further. She was convinced Ethan and I were soulmates, destined to be together, and she couldn't understand why I'd rejected him. She'd recently started dating Ethan's older brother, Mark, which only fueled her obsession with keeping Ethan in our lives. To her, the idea of us both marrying brothers and being best friends forever was the ultimate dream. My refusal to marry Ethan shattered that fantasy, and she blamed me entirely. The drama that followed was relentless. My family wouldn't let it go. They kept inviting Ethan to every family event, from birthdays to Christmas dinners, as if nothing had changed. At first, I didn't mind too much. Ethan was still Daniel's best friend, and I didn't want to cause more tension. But Laura took it to another level. She started meddling in ways that made my skin crawl. She'd arrange surprise meetings, like inviting me to dinner only for Ethan to show up as my date. During family holidays, she'd insist Ethan and I share a room, claiming there wasn't enough space for separate arrangements. She'd even orchestrate group activities where Ethan and I were paired together, like forcing us to team up for a scavenger hunt at our annual family picnic. It was suffocating. Ethan, for his part, didn't push too hard, but he'd always give me these longing looks that made me uncomfortable. I could tell he still had feelings for me, and my sister's encouragement only made it worse. After months of this, I'd had enough. I sat my parents down and begged them to intervene. I explained how Laura's behavior was making me dread family gatherings, how I felt trapped by their refusal to accept my decision. My dad, always the more level-headed of my parents, understood and promised to talk to Daniel and Laura. My mom, however, was more hesitant. She kept saying things like, "Ethan's such a good boy. Are you sure you're not making a mistake?" But eventually, they both agreed to set some boundaries. Daniel backed off, and Ethan stopped being invited to every family event. It wasn't perfect, but it gave me some breathing room. Laura, however, refused to let go. She'd make snide comments whenever I saw her, like, "You'll never find anyone as good as Ethan," or, "You're going to regret this one day." I tried to ignore her, but her words stung. A few years later, I went abroad for college, eager to start fresh. It was there, in a bustling European city, that I met the man who would become my husband, James. He was studying engineering at a different university, but we crossed paths at a cultural festival organized for international students. James was everything I didn't know I needed: thoughtful, ambitious, and endlessly supportive. We bonded over our shared love of history, spending weekends exploring ancient ruins and museums. For the first time, I felt a connection that wasn't weighed down by expectations or pressure. It was magical, like something out of a fairy tale. After a year of dating, James proposed during a quiet evening stroll along a river, the city lights reflecting on the water. I said yes without hesitation, my heart full of certainty. When I called my family to share the news, they were thrilled, except for Laura. She dismissed my engagement as a phase, insisting I'd grow out of it once the honeymoon period ended. Her words hurt, but I refused to let her ruin my happiness. James and I returned home after college, and we started planning our wedding. Laura's behavior only got worse. She kept bringing up Ethan at every opportunity, telling me I was making a mistake by marrying James. She'd say things like, "Ethan's still single, you know. He's waiting for you." Or, "You're throwing away your destiny." I tried to stay calm, but her persistence was infuriating. Finally, after one particularly heated argument where she called James a rebound, I gave her an ultimatum. If she tried to meddle in my relationship with Ethan again, I'd cut her out of my life completely. I thought that would be the end of it, but Laura had other plans. When she got married to Mark a few months later, she made me a bridesmaid, seemingly a peace offering. But it was a trap. She forced me to spend time with her wedding party, which included Ethan, and even paired James with one of her friends as his date for the event. I was horrified when I saw this girl flirting with James during the reception, and when I confronted Laura, she shrugged and said, "You're not married yet, so he can still explore his options." I was livid. I left the wedding early, tears streaming down my face, and the next day, I told my parents and Daniel I was done with Laura. I made it clear I wouldn't force them to choose between us, but I was no longer willing to have a relationship with her. I also warned them that if they tried to reconcile us, I'd cut them off too. My mom was heartbroken and tried to mediate, but my dad and Daniel promised to respect my decision. For the next 6 years, I had no contact with Laura. I didn't speak to her, text her, or acknowledge her at family events. My mom made 2 attempts to bring us together, but I shut them down immediately. Laura tried everything to get my attention, sending me gifts, leaving voicemails, even throwing tantrums at family gatherings, but I ignored her. At first, she'd make snarky comments to provoke me like, "You're so cold-hearted," or, "You're tearing this family apart." But when no one took her side, she eventually stopped. The only time she truly lost control was when she found out she was invited to my wedding, but wouldn't be involved in the planning. She called me, screaming about how unfair I was being, but I hung up and blocked her number. Meanwhile, Daniel started to feel guilty for not stepping in sooner. His friendship with Ethan had cooled significantly. They still talked, but the closeness was gone. I could tell Daniel regretted enabling Laura's behavior for so long. Things came to a head a few weeks ago at my mom's birthday party. I was 30 now, happily married to James, and we just found out I was pregnant with our first child, a girl. It would be my parents' first granddaughter, though not their first grandchild, as Daniel already had kids. I announced the news at the party, expecting everyone to be overjoyed. Most of the family was. My dad's eyes lit up, and Daniel hugged me tightly, saying he couldn't wait to meet his niece. But Laura's reaction was cold. She barely acknowledged the announcement, her face tight with resentment. My mom noticed and, a few days later, invited me over for tea. I had a bad feeling about it, but I wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. When I arrived, I saw Laura's car in the driveway. Inside, I found not only Laura and her husband, Mark, but also Ethan and his mother. My stomach dropped. They launched into a coordinated attack, saying my childish grudges had gone too far. Ethan claimed he'd only been trying to be romantic all those years ago, and I'd overreacted by cutting him out. His mother chimed in, saying I was wrong to hurt Laura, who only wanted the best for me, and since Laura had apologized, I was obligated to forgive her. My mom then read a letter she'd written, her voice trembling, about how much it pained her to see her daughters at odds. She admitted Laura had been wrong, but insisted her intentions were good. Laura followed with her own letter, breaking down in tears and echoing the same sentiments. I sat there in silence, texting James, my dad, and Daniel for backup. I felt trapped, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. When Daniel arrived, he was furious, more furious than I'd ever seen him. He grabbed my things, told everyone he was disgusted with their behavior, and stormed out with me. We sat in his car, waiting for James and my dad, while I sobbed uncontrollably. Daniel kept apologizing, saying he should have done more to protect me. I don't know what happened in the house after we left, but I sent a letter to everyone except my mom, including my lawyer's contact information, stating I didn't want any of them to contact me again or I'd involve the police. No one has reached out since, but my dad later told me that my mom and Laura were in hysterics. They'd hoped this intervention would fix everything, and Laura even wanted to be involved in my child's life, possibly as the godmother. The idea made me sick. My dad moved in with Daniel, and both of them have been fully supportive. But some extended family members and mutual friends have taken Laura's side, calling me to ask what happened because Laura's been telling everyone James is keeping me from my family. I hate airing personal matters publicly, but I'd had enough. I wrote a detailed post on Facebook, laying out everything, Laura's meddling, the intervention, all of it. The comments tore Laura, Mark, and Ethan apart, which wasn't my goal but felt justified. My mom is devastated, and I feel for her, but not enough to forget how betrayed I felt at her house. We agreed to talk in a few days, and I set strict conditions for any future contact, mandatory family therapy, clear boundaries, no sharing my info with Laura, and separate holidays. Most importantly, if she tries anything like this again, I'm done for good. She thinks it's too harsh but agreed, though she expected me to immediately share baby updates, assuming everything was resolved. I told her it's a long process, and she'll need to prove she's changed. My dad and Daniel have cut Laura off completely and keep apologizing for their past inaction. We've forgiven them. They've shown they understand the situation now. James supports whatever I decide, but my mother-in-law wonders if I should completely cut my mom off from her granddaughter. I'm torn. Update 1. To clarify, Ethan and I broke up when I was 18. He's now 37. I didn't want to marry or get engaged so young. That's why we ended things. Laura's obsession stems from her fantasy of us both marrying brothers and being best friends. My mom always seemed so kind to James, but now I'm questioning if it was all an act, which breaks my heart. Ethan has 2 kids from another relationship but never married their mother. Laura finds this romantic, believing he's always wanted me. He's been obsessive with others too, like the mother of his kids, but now he's fixated on me again because Laura encourages him, saying she needs his help too. Win me back and be a good aunt. Daniel started distancing himself from Ethan when I said I was uncomfortable around him, especially during college breaks when I'd visit home. He's made a huge effort to make James feel welcome, which strained his friendship with Ethan, who felt betrayed. Now James and Daniel are close, and Daniel only tolerates Ethan for Laura's son, his nephew. My parents seemed to support my distance from Ethan, but only my dad was truly on my side. That day at my mom's, she told my dad she was making my favorite tea and wanted alone time with me, so he left to visit his brother, thinking it was a sweet gesture. Now he's furious. James tried to connect with Laura at first, but now he ignores her, believing she has mental health issues. We don't know if that's true, but her behavior is inexcusable. They invited Ethan and his mom to help me resolve my issues with Laura, or so they claim. We're not Indian, not very religious. James and I are the same race, and there's no financial disparity between Ethan and James. If anything, James is better off. My sister-in-law and James' sisters are livid about this situation. Daniel and his wife might cut off my mom too, and for now, they've stopped letting her see their kids. I'm starting to think I may need to cut my mom off completely for my child's safety. James is hurt that my mom's kindness might have been fake, but he's angrier that she made me cry and doubt myself. I'm pursuing a restraining order against Laura and Ethan. Update 2. My mom keeps insisting I'm a bad person and says she'll fight for her right to see my child, even threatening custody. I panicked. We'd already sent her a legal letter. My dad moved out for good, telling her he won't support her terrorizing me. Daniel and his wife have also cut her off. It might seem drastic, but I was in such despair after that day at my mom's. James told them they need to learn to be kind and empathetic, but he won't raise our child in a toxic environment. My dad and Daniel keep apologizing, still in disbelief at how far this has gone, but they fully support me. Update 3. We've become paranoid, and for good reason. We waited to announce the baby's gender until 20 weeks because of a past loss. We thought it'd be special for my mom, but after my last post, we searched our house and found a tracker on our dog's vest. My dad discovered it while walking him near the hotel we moved to. Laura approached him, asking about me. We moved again, renting a new place and leasing our old house. We all changed our numbers, got new devices, and notified everyone necessary. My dad rewrote his will. Laura's son gets a trust fund, but she gets almost nothing. I've given birth, and it's a blessing, though I miss my mom. We tested people by saying I was about to give birth, finding out who was leaking info to my mom and Laura, and cut them off. Ethan, now called Bates by my friends, is telling everyone the child is his. James got him suspended from his job, and he'll likely be fired. My mom can't find us, and all communication goes through lawyers. My dad is an amazing grandpa, though I worry about him being alone. Update 4. We moved into a new house, and my dad lives in the guest house. He sees the grandkids often, but meets Laura's son separately. She won't let him take the child without knowing where he lives. My parents are divorcing. My mom kept the house, but struggles financially. Laura's son started bullying my child, calling her a bastard, so my dad cut contact until it stops. Bates was fired, his reputation ruined. He sent me long letters and posted a private photo of me and my baby, claiming she's his. We found out my dad's sisters were leaking info to my mom and cut them off. My family is thriving without the toxicity. James and I are even discussing another child or adoption. I miss my mom, but my family's safety comes first.